Listen, cracking pulmonology on the TUS isn't about memorizing a million different diseases. It's about mastering pattern recognition. And the key to that pattern, the absolute codebreaker, is one single test, the pulmonary function test, or PFT. Today, we're going to build the exact mental framework you need to look at these tests and get the right answer, fast, even when the clock is ticking. So let me ask you a question. Is it really possible to diagnose a complex lung disease in, say, 10 seconds just by looking at a graph? I know, it sounds kind of impossible, but I promise you, by the end of this session, you'll be able to glance at a flow volume loop and immediately know what category of disease you're dealing with. We're going to make that skill second nature for you.
All right, here's our game plan. It's a 5-step strategy. We start with the number one symptom, dyspnea. Then we hit the most critical decision point, obstructive versus restrictive. After that, we'll decode the PFTs themselves, apply it all to some classic TUS cases, and finally, we'll run through the high-yield traps where so many people lose points. This isn't a lecture, it's a diagnostic strategy.
Okay, let's dive in. Pretty much every single pulmonology question you're going to face on the TUS, it all kicks off with one chief complaint. Dyspnea, shortness of breath. This is our way in. It's the first clue in the mystery. Okay, Hojam, so let's say a vignette drops the term chronic dyspnea. In that first critical second, what's our high-yield differential? Where does our mind need to go immediately?
Excellent question. You need an automatic reflex. Your brain has to instantly snap to the 4 heavy hitters, the ones that cause real structural problems: COPD, asthma, heart failure, and interstitial lung disease. Yeah, sure, things like postnasal drip or GERD can cause it, but in a TUS question, you always rule out the big 4 first.
And now we come to the single most important decision you will make in any pulmonary question. Once you see dyspnea, your entire diagnostic algorithm, everything that follows, hinges on answering one single question. Is this an obstructive process, or is it a restrictive one? Getting this right is everything.
So let's break this down mechanistically. Obstructive disease is a problem of getting air out. Think COPD, think asthma. The airways are narrow, air gets stuck inside, and the residual volume goes way up. We call that air trapping. Restrictive is the complete opposite. It's a problem getting air in. The lungs are stiff, fibrotic, so you just can't expand them. You lose total lung capacity.
Okay, so the core problem is air trapping versus volume loss. I get the concept, but on the exam with the clock ticking, how do we prove which one it is?
Exactly. And that's the million-dollar question. We prove it with the evidence, and the evidence is the pulmonary function test. PFTs are how we go from just a hunch to a rock-solid diagnosis. Every number, every curve on that printout is telling a story. Our job is to learn how to read it.
This table simplifies everything, but I want you to focus on one critical value. Now here's a trap. Notice how FEV1 and FVC can both be decreased in either condition. That's confusing. But the ratio of FEV1 to FVC, the Tiffin-Noe index, that is the game changer. In obstructive disease, the FEV1 plummets, and that crashes the ratio below 70%. That's diagnostic. In restrictive disease, they both fall together, so the ratio stays normal. This isn't just a number. It is the master switch for your entire algorithm. Now let's actually see what this story looks like. This is the classic flow volume loop for obstructive disease. Look at that expiratory curve. See how it's caved in? We call this the Kepche, or the scooped out appearance. This shape isn't just a random drawing. It is the pathophysiology. It's showing you the small airways collapsing too early, which is what traps air in the lungs. That scoop is a direct picture of increased residual volume. And then you have the complete opposite. This is the restrictive pattern. The whole loop is just shrunken. It's narrow and tall like a kadashapkasa, a witch's hat. Why? Because the total lung capacity is shot. The patient can't get much air in, so they can't blow much air out. The overall shape is normal, but the volume is gone. Scoop versus witch's hat. It's that simple. Okay, Hojam, that's super clear. Scoop for obstructive, witch's hat for restrictive? I've got it. But how does this actually play out in a TUS vignette? How do we apply this when we're under pressure?
Perfect question. Let's make it real. We're going to run 2 classic TUS case simulations right now.
All right, here's case number 1. We've got a 60-year-old woman, a non-smoker, with progressive dyspnea and a dry cough.
And the physical exam? Whoa, stop right there. Bibasilar Velcro rails. That's the money phrase. That's the whole case.
Exactly. Velcro rails is your code word. It's practically pathognomonic for interstitial lung disease, and specifically idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And with that one clue, you can predict the entire clinical picture. You know the PFT will be restrictive, with a decreased total lung capacity and a normal FEV1/FVC. The HRCT is just going to confirm it with honeycombing. Diagnosis, IPF. Done. Okay, now for case 2. A completely different patient, a 65-year-old male, long-term smoker with chronic cough and dyspnea.
The physical exam findings are textbook. Barrel chest, using accessory muscles, Hoover sign. I mean, this whole picture is just screaming one thing.
And what is it screaming? Air trapping. Every single one of those findings is a direct result of air trapping. The Fichtergos, or barrel chest, that's just the physical shape of lungs that have been hyperinflated for years. Hoover's sign? That's the diaphragm getting flattened by all that trapped air. So we expect an obstructive PFT, low FEV1/FVC, high residual volume. Diagnosis, COPD.
All right, you have mastered the basics. Now, it's time to enter the gauntlet. These are the high-yield traps, the more advanced concepts that separate a good score from a truly great one. This is where the real points are made. Let's do it.
Okay, Hojam, here's a classic one that always causes confusion. We know the scoop and the witch's hat. But what about those really weird-looking flow volume loops where both the inspiratory and the expiratory curves are flattened? What does that tell us?
That is a classic TUS trap. And you're right, it's not obstructive or restrictive in the usual sense. It's pointing to a very specific problem in the large airways.
This slide is pure gold. Think of it this way. A variable obstruction inside the chest gets squeezed during expiration, so it flattens the expiratory curve. A variable one outside the chest gets sucked in during inspiration, flattening the inspiratory curve. But a fixed obstruction, like tracheal stenosis, is like a rock in the airway. It doesn't move. It limits airflow both ways, flattening both curves. So the answer is a fixed upper airway obstruction. Another point of confusion is always DLCO. I get that it's decreased in emphysema and fibrosis. That makes sense. But what's the big TUS trap when it comes to asthma?
Right. This is the trap that catches so many people. In pure asthma, you'd think gas exchange would be impaired, right? But it's not. The DLCO is often normal or can even be increased. This is because of increased blood flow in the lungs. It's a critical, high-yield way to tell asthma apart from emphysema-dominant COPD. You have to know this.
And what about the interstitial diseases? If the imaging isn't totally clear, what's the next step? Let's talk about bronchial alveolar lavage, or BAL.
Absolutely. This table is incredibly high yield. Just look at sarcoidosis and hypersensitivity pneumonitis. They can both be lymphocyte dominant, which is a trap, but the CD4 to CD8 ratio tells them apart. A high ratio over 3.5, that screams sarcoidosis. A low ratio, under 1, that points right to HP. Neutrophils suggest fibrosis, like IPF, and of course, tons of eosinophils means eosinophilic pneumonia.
So let's put it all together. This right here is your master key. This is your mental framework for every pulmonary question. You see the question, you start with dyspnea. Then you use the FEV1/FVC ratio to make that first critical decision, obstructive or restrictive. Confirm your gut feeling with the shape of the flow volume loop. Then you hunt for the clinical buzzwords in the vignette to nail the specific diagnosis. So I'll leave you with one final challenge to think about. What happens when the PFTs are giving you a mixed picture? You see a low FEV1/FVC ratio, which tells you it's obstructive. But you also see a low total lung capacity, which tells you it's restrictive. What two conditions could be happening at the same time to create this picture? Think about it. Apply the framework we built today, keep practicing, and you will absolutely crack the code on exam day.